Hello, hello. Thank you, Tom, for giving me a promotion. I'm not the CMO, but thank you. I just to be clear, in case you know my CMO, I don't want to make it seem like
we don't have a CMO, so I'm good. I'm in the clear. So
okay,
thank you.
Fantastic. Well, going up in the world. So I'll let you introduce yourselves, talk about your role and your brand, and given that we're talking about storytelling today, what was your pick for the Oscar this year that told the best story? So we'll just start left to right.
Cool. My name is Jack Meredith, VP of Marketing at Kettle and Fire. I've been with the brand for about 8 to 9 years. It's been a crazy journey. Was started when the company was literally myself and the 2 co-founders. We had no retail footprint at all, just direct to consumer, and now we're, I think, over 100 million in the past year from a revenue standpoint. Favorite Oscar movie, best storytelling? I'm going to go with Civil War, which was not even nominated, but that was my favorite. Yeah.
Great shout.
Nice. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabe Alonso. So I oversee integrated marketing and experience at El Pollo Loco. Essentially, my team is split into 2 halves. So I have demand generation on one side, social, PR, influencers, culture, partnerships, all the fun stuff. And then demand capture sits on the other side of CRM, loyalty, our digital ecosystem. So that is app, web, kiosks, and restaurant, basically any consumer-facing technology. And then I also oversee paid media, so that kind of goes between both demand gen, demand capture, depending on how we deploy it. If you're not familiar with EPL, we are a Southwest regional fire-grilled chicken brand inspired by the flavors of Mexico. We're about 500 restaurants all throughout the Southwest, so in 7 states, and not too far from me. We're in Dallas. Unfortunately, not in Austin yet, but hopefully soon. And then favorite Oscar movies. So I really enjoyed Complete Unknown. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan. Also, when I first moved to New York, just like a little anecdote, I actually listened to his entire discography while reading his biography. So it was just like a very nostalgic, hit home kind of movie. So I really enjoyed it.
Great. You thought Chalamet did a good job?
I thought he did a fantastic job. Show me. Someone had to do it.
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Annika, Welander. I'm the COO of Someoddpilot, which is a creative agency, a boutique creative agency in Chicago that focuses on brand transformation. We have been in business since 1999, and we actually started as an indie record label. So we got our foot in music first. From there, we grew up working in the independent music space. So we did Pitchfork Music's first logo, their first website. We started working with venues, with indie record labels, and beyond, and editorials. From there, we grew to start working into consumer brands, specifically apparel, because we were sort of recognized as knowing how to talk to the kids, knowing how to make things cool, essentially. And our client list now includes Lollapalooza. We got to rebrand them a couple years ago, fully 15,000 touch points, kind of a nuts rebrand, into a lot of work in the outdoor space. Patagonia is a huge client of ours. Chaco Sandals, Saucony running shoes, Smith Optics. We work in the sports space as well. So we are the AOR for the Chicago Fire, which is Chicago's MLS team. Just got a brand new coach. We got the men's coach from the U.S. national team. We're very excited about that. So we'll see what happens this season. And great CPG brands. So we work quite a bit with Campari and their brands, Sky Vodka, American Honey, and then of course with Jack at Kettle and Fire, the best bone broth you can find. As far as Oscars, I'm very into all the narratives around this stuff as somebody who works in creative, and I, not to pick the winner, but Anora I thought was fantastic. But what was even more exciting was to find out recently that Neon put $18 million behind a $6 million budgeted movie to market that. So I think it's a good lesson about what you can do if you have good product and you have a good brand story. If you put spend behind that, you can win a ton of Oscars, apparently. So, yeah, that's great.
No Emilia Perez fans on the panel, it appears, or in the world. And just by way of my own introduction, I'm Tom. I'm head of strategy for Been There, Done That. Been There, Done That is a strategic and creative consultancy that's kind of premised on a new model. We have a community of 500 of the best marketing minds in the world, so we can find the very best brain for any client challenge. Okay, let's get into it. The discussion title is Building Brand Love and Lasting Loyalty Through Data and Storytelling, which is a great word salad, and a lot of marketing buzzwords in there. But through speaking to the three of you, I think we got to this point where we really started breaking it down together. And there were three sort of themes that kind of really come out of that feel important. The first is actually brand love, what it really genuinely means, and how it is related to loyalty and how you start building it. The second is storytelling itself. What new means, methods, and capabilities do we have to tell stories, and how do we do it in a way that is modern, enduring? How do we give power to our consumers as well as holding on to the essence of our brand? And finally, data. Where does data fit into this picture? What can it tell us? What can't it tell us? What are some interesting new ways and new things we're doing with data? So, first, love. To quote Hardaway, what is love? And why is it the holy grail for your brands? Gabe, I'm going to start with you. And what is really necessary for El Pollo Loco? Nice. Gabe's got his own entrance music.
Sorry, I was just heavily distracted. It's too early for me still. So, I think what's interesting with EPL, clearly, like, everybody knows what we stand for. It's in our name. It's all about chicken, right? That is what we do. That is what we are known for through and through. I think what's interesting about brand love, though, is sort of what happens when you don't talk about your product. What happens when people aren't talking about our chicken? What is it about us that they are going to kind of remember and take away? And really, to me, that's not only what helps with awareness, but it's really also what helps drive consideration at the end of the day, which is something that we are building right now. And so, I think we know that kind of, product and brand for us need to work together a little bit. But in particular, if we're not talking about chicken, what is it that we're talking about? And for me, that's really what we're trying to candidly figure out right now, in terms of how we work in the community, sort of our passion points, how we can power other things in culture like sport or music or things of that nature. So we're kind of in the thick of it right now of making some key investments to help sort of provide credibility to the product that then will allow us to build a little bit more authenticity for our brand, that we hope when we're not talking about chicken, people will still be like, oh, like EPL, they're that brand that does that thing. And even though I might not know about their product, I'm still very willing to make them part of my life. But again, to bring it back, like product, we have to then execute when they come into our restaurants. And that's where really product comes back around for us, because just being cool isn't enough when you need to sell chicken. So.
And Jack, obviously you were that kind of category leader and dominant force. How did you guys create that love in its first instance, and how are you trying to build on that, and why is brand love so important for your product?
Yeah, I think like since day one, what's always been consistent with our brand is like, how can we make the best quality products out there? And that's something that we've never really deterred from. So when you are chopping down the aisle and you see Kettle and Fire, you know what that means. That means high quality, protein, no bullshit in the ingredients. And I think due to that, that's resonated with folks. And even in the early days when we didn't have as big of a footprint as we do now, we were able to really build our tribe because folks always knew that they were getting what they were paying for. They knew that when they bought our products, they were going to have an incredible experience drinking it, and it's something that they could trust us with versus all the other brands in the aisle. And I think as we expanded into retail, that expansion was easy because we already had built that footprint. We already had built that brand love to where folks that were purchasing online were now going into Whole Foods, going to Kroger, all those other retailers, and continuing to purchase over and over again.
That's interesting, and it's interesting that kind of trust is such a constituent part of the love, and it kind of it's true of any relationship too, right? It's if you can trust it, you can love it. What the Annika, you've got a great phrase that you use, and because I think the important part for me is the difference between like and love. Because like is rational, love is emotional, and to get your brand into that space is really key. So what's your sort of brand building theory that we spoke about?
Yeah. So our background in music, and I should say that my business partner, Chris, who's the founder of the business, he has played drums in metal bands since he was in middle school. So and he still does. So when we think about brand building and brand love, we have a phrase that we use around the office that is brands are bands. Like the best brands are bands. And what we mean by that is that, they're able to, the meaning that they can have for people can transcend function, can transcend the need, the like, even the want, to the covetable, to where you are taking something in an irrationally passionate way, and you are making it basically part of your self-concept. And in order to do that, you need to be anchoring on much more than functional value props about your products and things like that. You need to go real deep to get there. I think brand love is really amazing because you can experience brand love without ever having engaged with the product, without ever having purchased the product. Like imagine, you're a kid and you love cars and you love BMWs. But you're 12 years old. You're not buying a BMW anytime soon, unless, maybe some children, I don't know. But you're waiting 20 years and then you finally get to do that. But you've been, proselytizing the value of BMW as a brand for multiple decades. So I think love really transcends the rational decision making. And what I think is great is that can build a moat for your brand that competitors are going to find it very hard to get through because there is no logical, rational way to do it. So yeah.
And so Kettle obviously is a hugely popular brand. How do you see people's love and attachment to it kind of manifesting in the real world, sort of organically, without it being provoked?
Yeah, I think one particular story that stands out. So this was about 2 years ago, October 2023, and we were all in the office going about our business, normal business day, and then all of a sudden, all of our phones started blowing up, and buddies and friends were texting us because if you guys are familiar with UFC, Dana White, pretty big figurehead, he had recently done this 3-day extreme weight loss regimen that involved fast, and so in the video he's kind of talking passionately about hey, I did this thing. Only drank water for 3 days. It was nuts, but I'm ripped now. Look at me. And then about 2 minutes into the video, he's like, "Oh, and by the way, to help with the fast, I use bone broth, and this is the best fucking brand right here. I would never use anything else other than Kettle and Fire." And we were all just what the fuck is going on? UFC, Dana White, and that was we had no previous relationship with him. That was all organic, and it led to a really cool relationship once we connected with their team and everything. But I think that's an example of hey, because of the quality that we put behind our products and staying true to our mission, that type of stuff happens that it's priceless. So.
And Gabe, how are you starting to try and take consumers on that love El Pollo journey? What are you kind of instigating?
They should already be on it, but no. So again, we are a regional brand, and so as we try to become a national one, it's incredibly important that we do what we can to start chipping away at that share of voice that larger competitors have, like your Taco Bells, your Chipotles, et cetera, right? And we are also heavily based in California, and so people in Cali tend to know who we are. We are kind of all over the place, but as you go out into our outer markets, awareness gets lower and lower. And so for us, what we've seen is we just need to create more content, and that is both internally with our social media manager and our teams, but also through using creators. And so something we've done over the last year and a half or so, and really in the last 6-7 months, is we've kind of flipped from a mostly macro mid-tier creator approach, influencer approach to support big product launches, to an evergreen micro nano strategy. What we kind of found was, using mid-tier macros, you would have this sort of 2-week period where you'd get the impressions, people would pay attention to you, and then it would kind of just wane away, just kind of dissolve and go away, right? And that's not helpful when you still have another 8 weeks of product that you need to sell. And so what we've been able to do is redeploy those funds now towards micros and nanos. I think we've, in the kind of 18 months prior to August of last year, it was something like we used 60 macro mid-tier influencers. From August to the end of last year, we doubled that number. I think we were close to like 100 micros and nanos. And when you look at the numbers, we had more impressions, more content, engagement rates were better overall, and we whitelisted a lot of that content because now we could afford to. And so putting money behind it, our CPMs actually went down as well, so we were able to be more efficient with the media that we put against those micros and nanos. And that coupled with some great new hires on the earn side on my team, you can just start to see this momentum start to build. More people talking about us, hearing about our food, being excited about our food, which now helps as we continue to bring out new innovations this year and really drive the brand. So yeah, we're feeling some great momentum with some of these shifts.
I think that again speaks to the nature of love itself, which is actually when you are there in the grassroots and creating a sense of community and belonging and attachment to the story of the brand, that's so much more powerful in terms of building that love and longevity and loyalty. I'm really interested to hear where Kettle is at on that journey at the moment, because I know you guys have been, I think the plan is to grow, obviously now beyond your core consumer and those that love you already. Where are you at in the journey of growth at the moment?
Yeah, so like today we are the number one bone broth brand in the U.S., but the bone broth category is a bit smaller than the total broth category, and so I think for us to expand beyond that, we're going to have to reach more of a mainstream consumer, and you're seeing that with like how our retail distribution has evolved over time. So we started in Whole Foods, Sprouts, more natural retailers. Now we're in Walmart and Target, and so I think we have to take what we know is true about our brand, but kind of shift that to be relevant and more relatable to different types of shoppers. And so I think going back to the UFC example, once that Dana White post came off, it kind of lit a light bulb underneath us of like, oh shit, we have traditionally been more female oriented. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to reach more of a male demographic. And I think with the fasting, we've been aware of fasting. We know how bone broth plays a role into that, but I really do think that Dana White post made it more of a mainstream thing. And so we really kind of took advantage of that opportunity, connected with the UFC partnership team, had more of a standard partnership in the past year to build credibility in that space. And I think that's what I've tried to do like over and over again is like, how can we reach different groups of folks and like find the folks that are really influential and people relate to and look up to, and build credibility that way. So that's has been our approach.
Amazing. And Annika, when you're kind of stewarding the brand to tell your story to a new audience, what were the key things that kind of felt like you had to hang on to them and hang your hat on them, and what were you able to kind of do away with to tell a fresh story?
Yeah, I think I want to applaud Jack and the Kettle and Fire team, just because when you are sitting in a dominant leadership position, it's very easy to decide to just kind of play defense. And I think what Jack and team came to us with was the request to operate as like a challenger brand, to do something to crack out of the space, to change the way that creative works in the space, because the bone broth category is like a pretty same.
Pretty sleepy category.
Yeah, like the joke in the office, and one of the insights was it's a lot of white women in white kitchens. Like that's what you're going to see across all the channels. So I think what our task was to get at the core like value of Kettle and Fire, which bone broth is like it's a very simple concept that's like hard, that has a very high bar to clear to make it great. And Kettle and Fire uses the best possible ingredients to make the most simple intake of like fantastic nutrition and protein. So like what we needed to do was to like ground it in that insight of like simplifying everything. Like you guys use simple ingredients, but they're the best. So our insight was kind of rooted in that, and how we could kind of explode off of that creatively to kind of leave the rest of the categories creative in the dust, which we'll look at later, maybe.
Yeah, we're going to have the world premiere of Kettle's
Yeah, this is
spot.
Not in market. Damn. Nobody record. Yeah. Or maybe do.
So that when moving on to this whole idea of storytelling, clearly I almost think that the word storytelling isn't quite right anymore, because a story is a very linear, very singular thing. And actually, in the world in which we operate, it's almost more like brand world building. And what do you call it? Brand mythology, I think, is the word you use, because there are so many touch points, so many different ways to meet your consumer where they're at, so many tiny moments that you can tell a story in. So how are you trying to manage that incredibly complex ecosystem, but keep that story consistent throughout?
Whoever wants to
go for it.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think I feel like with media especially, there's so many different formats. I think short form is clearly taken over, given our tiny attention spans. So I think for us, it's like, how can we creatively find our wedge in to where we're not like just obviously selling our products, but more like how can we be part of that story? And I think with bone broth, it's such a versatile product. There's so many different reasons and usage occasions for people to try it. That gives us a lot of opportunity to kind of lean into maybe like a 30-30-30 protein diet, or the fasting regimen, or like if you have like an autoimmune disease, we can help you with that. So like, how can we tell our story in an authentic way, but also a way that's like entertaining and grabs people's attention? I think that's a big one that a lot of like health and wellness brands lose track on, is like in the health and wellness space, it's very like, hey, 10 grams of protein here, we help with your gut health. It's like the same shit over and over and over again. So like, how can we kind of twist that a little bit to where it's like something that's going to cut through all the noise and like grab someone's attention as they're mindlessly scrolling on Instagram, Twitter late at night. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that certainly doing something unexpected is kind of mission critical. Gabe, I know you were talking about some of the slightly less usual activations that EPL has kind of got involved in, and how successful they've been. So what was the kind of storytelling approach there? Why did you do what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's a little bit about occasions as well, is being able to show up in places we wouldn't normally show up in. And for us, it was at things like Hypebeast Hype Golf event, or at Wadapalooza, a CrossFit event in Huntington Beach. We've done partnerships with Lala Romero, where who's a big kind of entrepreneur in Los Angeles, has worked with like the Rams and the Dodgers and a bunch of stuff, and done some like kits and things like that with her. We've been able to show up like in the houses now of creators and influential folks within Los Angeles as well. We've done things like Friendsgiving. Where we've actually hacked our own menu, and you can use our ingredients to create menu items for your own Friendsgiving thing. So it's like trying to figure out how to place us in occasions and need states where we wouldn't normally be through some of these experiences and activations. But also, again, to go back to the like creator component of it, it's like we can't tell all those stories ourselves. And another great benefit of kind of going to micros and nanos is now I can have more of an evergreen approach to my storytelling, powered by consumers effectively. And so those RTBs that we've all been talking about, now I can like deploy kind of these army of folks to each specific kind of RTB or passion point in a way that they can help provide, like, authenticate and give credibility to us that frankly we couldn't do ourselves, or wouldn't come off as authentic if it was just a brand. So it's been quite the journey, and I would say probably in the last year and change we've activated more than we have probably in the last 3 years or so. So it's definitely, we're trying to now figure out what is that takeaway opportunity. So as much as you experience the brand in the moment, which might be frankly through our food and sampling, what can you take away that's still actually important? That's not something you're going to throw away because you get it at every event that you go to or something like that. So that's kind of the next thing that we're trying to unlock, is how do we not become an ephemeral brand at these activations?
Yeah, and Annika, when you're talking about brand mythology, which is clearly a part of your process, what's in your head as you think about brand mythology?
Right. Yeah. I think I think there's sort of two components and two axes. Like one that you got at, which was this brand world building, which we like to think of as going kind of wide. You're going across channel. There's so many touch points. Like, have you guys all started your Substacks for your brands yet? Like, I don't, it's time to do that. There's so much to control with all the creators and everything, like, compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago. And then when we talk about mythology, we think about that as going deep over time. So like, a story is a single narrative that's told, right? So you can have a product story. I think it's to say that you have a brand story is probably like a misnomer, frankly, because what a mythology is really like a collection of stories that hang together, that are able to take up cultural like space in the minds culturally. And I think that in order to create that kind of brand mythology, to start to take up space in culture, that is an investment that needs to be made over time. And I think that often transcends the idea of looking at like the next quarter of sales and things like that. So it is a longer range process that does involve a lot of brand stewardship by people like Gabe and Jack, and also with agencies that get to sit and work with a brand over time. I think that being able to look at the long game on some of that's really important, and being able to hang everything on a set of, brand becomes very important because you're hanging all of that width on values, and you're hanging all of that time and depth on those values. So really understanding the core of that is very important.
Certainly, I kind of talk to clients all the time, and if you've only got one story and you have to rigidly stick to it, you don't have the flexibility and the reactivity for the way modern marketing works. And I think, like you say, if you've got the mythology and the mythos to draw on, it means you can tell new stories in an instant, but they are always consistent with your brand. And you can give people in the world at large the ability to tell your story for you, which is exactly what you were talking about, Gabe. How are we doing for time, John? We're okay? Cool. Yeah. Oh, shit. So let's get a little bit then more granular and practical, so we kind of understand the notion of love and what it takes to get there, the role of storytelling broadly in doing that. How does data play a role for you in this picture? What are you using it for, and what aren't you using it for, critically? Jack, you want to go, or anyone go?
You guys.
Yeah, we use data a lot. I would say the first 5 or 6 years at Kettle and Fire, we were just insanely intensive about data. Everything was very black and white. Did we hit our ROAS target? No. Okay, we're never going to do that again. Yeah. But I think as we've expanded and our distribution has grown, attribution is much more complicated now. And so given that, I think we still measure everything, but it's on a different time horizon and to use different metrics just altogether. I think where data maybe falls short is for example, when Justin, our founder, started at Kettle and Fire, if he was to look at a data set to determine what category to go into, bone broth would probably be extremely low on that data set. So I think you have to really combine the data, but also what you know about the market, what you know about consumers, your intuition as well. Last point, I think when it comes to surveys is a great way to gather insights about consumers, about the category. But at the same time, I would not look at those with as the 100% source of truth, because at the end of the day, while people maybe won't admit it, they don't always tell you the truth in those types of surveys. So it's important to, I think, always just make sure that you're looking at the data to give you a signal and point you in the right direction, but not to always look at that as the gospel.
Yeah. My favorite trick is to ask someone what they think someone else thinks, and they're more likely to tell you the truth that way than if you ask them what they think.
Totally.
Annika, when you're talking about kind of data sources and insight gathering in the latest work you've done behind this campaign, what was useful? What did you dig into? What did you unearth that felt differentiating and interesting?
Yeah, I think, we look at 4 categories, I think very familiar to a lot of people here, the 4 C's. So we look at consumer, we look at competitive, we look at cultural, and we look at the company. I think there were, as far as the consumer, there's a very serious health and wellness consumer for Kettle and Fire, and that person is basically deeply overwhelmed with trends. There's, with the advent of TikTok and things like that, there's truly no end of advice that you can receive. I mean, I can do all of my therapy on TikTok if I want to. At this point, I don't even, who needs to actually hire anyone? So there's just so much input. And I think what we found is that these consumers are looking for just a simple solution for like nutrition and high protein and everything they need to do to like push forward their wellness journey. That desire for simplicity aligned beautifully with the product offering and the brand offering from Kettle and Fire, which is like this very simple, elegant solution based on, really high quality ingredients. So the insight that we jumped off of, like I kind of mentioned before, was this idea of simplicity. You take that and you pair it with, basically looking for white space in the market. And that's sort of how we arrived into our creative space. Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, that rings true. If you've got to do a 10-minute cold plunge and drink your collagen coffee and have your and I'm like, what? I don't have enough time.
There's there was a great article that came out on Friday in the New York Times called, I think it was like "Too Many Trends!" ! And it was like Gen Z kids talking about how they can't keep up. It's by the time they're in coastal grandma wear, that's moved on. Like it's not cool anymore, and then it's like really sending them into like panic. And so when you look at I think apparel trends, it mirrors other trends in wellness and other things like that too. And there's this there's a sort of like an anti-consumption movement towards minimalism, even with the young people who are able to move quickest through these things. So I think it's like a good time for that. Yeah.
Very cool. And Gabe, what have you guys been doing in terms of instituting new approaches to data measurement? How's it working out, and what is working?
Yeah, I mean, so functionally, we're actually in the midst of a large MarTech audit to kind of power, I'd say, future-proof the brand and really power our future. We just want to make sure that we have the right tools and platforms to help us enable our growth. That goes all the way from, do we need a CDP? Where does our data all live? What loyalty platforms are we on? Our digital POS systems, are they the right ones that we're supposed to be on, et cetera, all the way down even to like social management platforms. So, we're kind of doing our due diligence right now to make sure that our systems can be integrated, that we can have a single source of truth for all of our data. Because now, as we start to really connect kind of consumer insight with media efficacy through our it's ever more important for us to have a handle on our whole world of data. And so that's sort of on the more like functional business side of it. On sort of the brand side, we've been doing a ton of research just to understand really where our brand sits, as well as who we should be marketing to. So we kind of already know our core audience: millennial, Gen X, Hispanic families. So a little bit older. Sorry, millennials. I'm a millennial. A little bit older. And we, as most, we had a gut feeling that we need to figure out how to start filling that top of the funnel, right, with new consumers, younger consumers. And one of the things we kind of came to realize is that I didn't want us to talk about Gen Z, because Gen Z eventually will get old, and then it's going to be Gen Alpha, and then it's going to be Gen Beta, and there's always going to be a new stereotypical generational name that we need to somehow attack. So what we've done is, we want to attack a life stage. So the 20-something, like the forever 20-something, right? Because that's a mindset. It's a life stage. More often than not, when you get in your 20s, you're post-college, you maybe have a little bit disposable income. Maybe you're thinking about settling down, or you have your first serious partner or whatever. And we can now start to build journeys and campaigns and stories around those things. And so we've kind of, as we continue to put a little bit more rigor around this group, we've kind of come up with this idea of the fast foodies. And they basically have a dual personality, one of which they want to live life to the fullest. They're super passionate about what they do. They want to get as much out of life as they can, but they also want to belong, and they want to be a part of a community, which I think kind of speaks to larger trends around no second, third, or fourth spaces. People feel lonelier than ever, et cetera. So for us now, as we think about how can we serve these folks, we'll take those two insights in particular to figure out now how do our activations need to come to life, our content, the people we work with, to help kind of support and fuel those kind of both sides of those fast foodies.
Great, and there's that theme of kind of belonging again, and feeling like you're a part of something, and the brand has got your back in that. Okay, great. Okay, well, let's just get on to the future then. I want to hear what is going to come up over the next year for you. What are the plans ahead? Any learning specifically on something that has been a real unlock for you in your business that you want to share before we go? And then, and following that, we will check out the spot, as it were.
Learnings, plenty. I guess like related to this conversation, a couple years back we did a pretty thorough like study on like our subscription customers for our DTC website. And where this came from was at the time we were trying to figure out like how can we make our DTC experience more sticky? How can we retain customers for a longer period of time? So we did a lot of customer interviewing, surveying, the whole 9 yards. And coming out of that, what was really interesting was that we gained some good clarity around like the fact that we have like very different types of buyers in our ecosystem. So the very heavy buyers they've been subscription customers for years and years. These folks were using bone broth almost like medicinally, like they had some type of condition or autoimmune disease or some issue to where like they had to have our product to feel good the next morning. But that was a very small segment of our customer base, whereas everyone else was more folks that like they love the product, but they didn't have to use it every day. And I think that was like a light bulb moment that went off for us, to where it's like, yes, loyalty is important, but like at the same time, you can't really like you can't mess with consumer behavior so much to where it's like you're trying to like just put a square peg in a round hole, for instance. And so I think for us, it's like how can we continue to like build great products, get more people into the fold, but not obsess over like how can we squeeze like $100 more in the next year for this particular customer.
Love before loyalty, as they say. Amazing. Yeah, Gabe, what's coming up?
Yeah, so this is a big year for us. So we're kind of in the midst of a brand refresh. So that'll be coming out in a couple of months. So keep an eye out for that. But it's also our 50th anniversary of the first restaurant that we opened in Sinaloa, Mexico. So when you talk about brand mythology, it's actually interesting because we're trying to figure out how do we balance sort of that chapter, like not being in the past, but still trying to build our future. So like we've been kind of working out how to sort of weave our anniversary throughout everything we do this year. And then sport, I've talked about it a couple times now, but sport for us is going to be something that we're going to be investing in a bit more. We do think we have a big opportunity just given our menu. Our chicken has a lot of protein in it. It's great fuel for sport. And so we think we have some great opportunities there. And then kind of for me on the more kind of, I'll say maybe a little bit more personally driven, there's a lot of community work that we're going to be doing as well, also connected to sport and like the youth. So there's a lot of fun stuff for us that I think we're going to start putting a little bit more rigor around the brand and giving it some finer edges. So excited.
I mean, that's another interesting sort of building block of brand love is if they see a brand that actually is making meaningful differences and wants to do better and help people out. I think that's a really core component of the brand love story. Annika.
Yeah. The future of a small boutique creative agency is always a bit of a question mark, but we're excited to continue our work with Kettle & Fire. I think one thing that we've learned, I think people look sometimes at you look at maybe like a commodity brand, you look at B2B, and you wonder, like, can I create brand love here too? If I work for a SaaS tech company that's B2B or whatever it might be, and like something that 2 points about this really. One, what we learned a long time ago was if we're going to run a creative agency, we like kind of need to put our money where our mouth is. So we also have a contemporary art gallery that we run in Chicago called Public Works and an apparel brand that's art and design focused. So like we go and we test out all of our suppositions and our learnings in our own space with our own products and building, and we build our own community. And really what that means then is that, at least in Chicago, like our Someoddpilot, our agency brand has far more meaning inside of it than just, a creative services company. Like we're really like rooted in the creative community and the arts community in Chicago. It's something that we kind of joke, we call it like the hat test at Someoddpilot when you want to think about brand love. Like an example I would have here, and I suggest everybody do this for if you own a company, if you work at a company, if you're at an agency, a brand, like what would it take to get you or your coworkers or any of your fans to wear a logoed hat of that brand proudly and unironically around? and that's because like you think about the difference between product love and brand love. Yeah. Like I love like Amazon Prime. it's probably my favorite product of all time. But I'm not going to be wandering around with an Amazon hat on anytime soon. But I also love, I don't know if we were talking about this earlier, but I play a ton of golf. I love Titleist golf clubs. I think that product is on par with Amazon Prime in my life, and I will wear that hat proudly on the golf course. So it's kind of like, what is the hat test? Like, think about that, and if you're not passing the hat test, it's probably maybe look at the brand agency you're working with, and also look at the creative agency you're working with.
Gabe, do you have any El Pollo Loco hats with you?
Not with me, but I do have them. So
I'm very hat promiscuous. I will absolutely wear a new hat.
I was thinking band tees though. Band tees would be fun.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Okay, amazing. Well, let's have a look at the spot, and then we'll turn over to some questions.
Crank that.
Okay, so eating healthy was way easier for those boneheads. The food was natural, grass-fed, free-range, all organic, everything. Just pure, simple ingredients. They'd end the day with a hot meal and be like, dude, this is so good. And she'd be like, I call it bone broth. And he would be like, that's fire. Be a bonehead. Drink bone broth.
Awesome. Love that. That is super fun.
So my real dream is that I'm in Whole Foods and there are people wearing hats that say Bonehead with a Kettle and Fire logo on the back.
Excellent. Cool. Questions? Well, we don't have a great deal of time, but fire away. Excuse the pun. Any questions? We only have 1 minute left, so it might be best to just nix it anyway.
About data and loyalty, what do you think is the most impactful metric to measure against, knowing that, right, share of wallet, buy rate, all these things have a lot of macros in the ways that we live in trying times, sometimes in CPG.
Yeah.
So how do you guys assign metrics to things like loyalty, really to competitive position, as you said earlier?
So like one thing we invested in recently was like a brand switching study, to where we basically took all the brands in our category and worked with a group that was able to tell us, like, in the past year, are you like net gaining or net losing in the market? And I think that's a good way to like you were saying, kind of eliminate some of the macro factors. And so for us, that was a very helpful signal to understand, okay, even if maybe the category's down year over year, between our competitors, are we stealing market share from them, or are they stealing market share from us? So, yeah.
One thing I'll add to that, where there's a little bit of difference between CPG and QSR, there's a lot of promiscuity in QSR, right? So people go everywhere. And so from a loyalty perspective, frequency and AOV are king, right? How can I get people to come back to my restaurant more often? And also assuming promotions aside, they're probably a race to the bottom at the end of the day. What are the other things that you can provide to help drive frequency? Might be better product, might be other experiences, etc. But frequency for us in particular is number one, with AOV and CLV kind of close behind. Yeah.
Cool. I think we are out of time, but thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Cheers.